All right, men, welcome to today's episode of Strong Men, Strong Marriages. What to do when your wife thinks you're a narcissist. So, a lot of the guys that come to me that I work with, their wife has like read a book, or she has seen an article, or she has come to the conclusion that you are a narcissist. Like she sees the signs, she thinks this is you, right? And it seems like there's not much you can do about it. But what we're going to go through today is like the actual diagnostic criteria for narcissistic personality disorder, which is what you would actually call somebody who is a narcissist. We're going to go through that today, and probably more importantly, we're going to talk about how do you actually prove to your wife that you're not, right? So you're kind of like, well, I don't think I am, but how do you prove it, right? How do you prove that your wife is wrong on this, that you're not a narcissist? So we're going to go through that today. So again, my name is Mike Fraser, MD. I'm a psychiatrist and marriage coach, and I help high-achieving Christian men have more intimate marriages. So some weekly wins from guys that are in my program, Love, Intimacy, and Legacy. So guys are, that have struggled with time with in-laws or with friends, like they're just enjoying that time now. Here's the thing, like you get to choose the emotions that you have when you go into different activities, right? It's called attitude sometimes. You get to choose your attitude. And guess what? Having a good attitude, first of all, feels better, and it's a lot more attractive to your wife, right? And to everybody, okay? Guys are getting more backbone and calling attention to their wife's problematic behaviors. Because look, sometimes you're going to do the right things, you're going to try and understand your wife, all of that, but she might be crossing the line, right? She might be doing things that need to be stopped, right? Where you need to have a boundary and say, like, call attention to that, and also decide what you're going to do if that behavior continues, whether that's maybe screaming at you, maybe that's just throwing stuff or whatever, right? You need to be able to set a boundary there and decide what you're going to do. Say, hey, you can keep doing that if you want, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave the situation. I'm going to, typically it's that. I'm going to leave the situation if you act that way, right? But it takes strength, right? It takes strength to do that. It takes belief in yourself. Being calm with kids' defiant behaviors. So this comes up a lot. I've had issues that, still continue to have issues with that at times. And just being able to manage their emotions well in those moments. Because guess what, guys? When you flip out at your kids, very unattractive to your wife. But when you can be calm and caring and kind, right? That's very attractive to her. Plus, like, that's what you want to be anyway to your kids. Wives are saying they can't believe the difference in their husbands. Like, they can't believe how much different this is, how well it works. I love hearing that from these wives. Strength to have difficult conversations. A lot of guys that are walking on eggshells, if you listen to last week's episode, guys are finding that strength to have these conversations that need to be had, right? To have the strength in themselves and the consideration for their wife to have these conversations and get to win-win agreements. We had our first in-person, well, not in person, but Zoom meeting for the Abundant Life Mastermind. This is the graduate group from people that graduate from Love, Intimacy, and Legacy that are wanting to continue to really grow as men, as Christians, and support each other in that, across all areas, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, sexual, continuing to develop across those areas. So super fun to meet together. Definitely felt, God's spirit with us. It was really cool. You guys are getting mental, emotional, and sexual connection after infidelity. Like, I love seeing this. It is 100% possible, but you have to go through these things, right? You got to build trust, communication, intimacy, and guys are doing it. Okay. And you can too, if that's your situation, right? Finding understanding old conflicts. People will come in, oh man, we just keep having this argument. We can't get past it. People are finding understanding, getting through it, right? Breaking through those old conflicts. For me this week, we had a fun time carving pumpkins together as a family and had a fun date night and just enjoying that family time together, which is really what this is all about, and being able to create those times for you guys too. Okay. So coming back to the idea of today's podcast, right? So your wife, she read a book or she read an article about narcissism, and now she's convinced, right? You are a narcissist. That's you, right? Or at least she's concerned that maybe you are, right? Or at least you have a lot of those traits. So what do? Usually you're like, what? No, I'm not. I'm not a narcissist. I don't do that at all. I don't do any of that stuff, right? How could you say that, And so when you do that, it makes her actually even more sure that you are a narcissist, right? Because you're not listening, you're not empathizing with her. Typically, the sort of like pop culture understanding of narcissism is it's somebody that's manipulative, right? That doesn't really empathize with others, almost like a sociopath, kind of like has no conscience, doesn't just manipulates people around him. is sort of like the popular understanding. But the bottom line is, if you're just like battling back with her and saying, no, I'm not, no, I'm not, she's like, oh, yes, you are. And really it is kind of evidence of that. Because a narcissist, it's true, they don't have empathy for other people. Okay. So if you're not trying to understand her perspective on it, you are kind of further proving her point that I think that maybe she's right, right? Maybe you are a narcissist. Okay. So let's go through this, guys. We're going to be kind of technical today. My training is in psychiatry, and what we use is something called the DSM now 5. There's different versions of it, but Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. So it goes through, it lists all these criteria. So we're going to go through the criteria today. So this is for narcissistic personality disorder. So again, there's a distinction, right? There's a distinction between people that have narcissistic traits, which pretty much everybody has some narcissistic traits, right? And someone who is a narcissist, meaning they have been diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, right? So we're going to go through some of them. Okay. So here they are, right? Impairments in self-functioning. In other words, you have some issues with your self, internal, okay? So one is identity. So excessive reference to others for self-definition and self-esteem regulation. In other words, this is like mosquito cycle, right? Saying, okay, like I really need attention, appreciation, affection, and, from people to feel good about myself. And I need sex from my wife. Those things plus sex from my wife to feel good about myself, right? That's the mosquito cycle. So again, right? So right there, we know that certainly I have this, right? And it's something that I'm working to recover and have recovered in a huge sense here, by connecting my work with God and the guys I work with are there too. But look, like mosquito cycle is that. So if you identify with the mosquito cycle, you identify with some part of being a narcissist. All right. The other thing is exaggerated self-appraisal, maybe inflated or deflated or vacillate between extremes. So basically that's saying, okay, like, yeah, I'm amazing, I'm the best. And then all of a sudden, oh, I'm terrible, I'm the worst, right? Maybe that applies to you, maybe it doesn't. Say for me personally, not a lot of that. Mine's usually like pretty high. My self-appraisal is pretty high most of the time. Although, yeah, maybe sometimes I do kind of drop down. So maybe I've got a little bit of that too. I'm diagnosing myself as we go here. Emotional regulation mirrors fluctuations in self-esteem, right? So when you're feeling good about yourself, you feel good. When you're feeling bad about yourself, you feel upset, you're stressed out, you have a hard time managing your emotions. Okay. Again, everybody has this to some extent, but it's like extreme, right? In someone with narcissistic personality disorder. Okay. Self-direction. So goal setting is based on gaining approval from others. I want to get this job so that I can get more attention. I want to get this, make more money so people can see the amount of money that I have, right? So again, everybody has this to some extent, right? We want approval from other people. But again, it's like excessive. It's really like the main driver. You want that from other people. Personal standards are unreasonably high to see oneself as exceptional or too low based on a sense of entitlement. So again, kind of like, I set my standards really high for myself, or maybe you grew up with that. I think I've got some of that. You want to be seen as the best at whatever you do. Okay. Is another way to put that. I think a lot of guys, a lot of high achievers have that. It's not necessarily wrong. Sometimes that's just, our personality, right? There's like a choleric personality type. It's kind of more like this. Or too low based on a sense of entitlement. Like, they think they deserve things from other people. And often they're unaware of their own motivations. Okay. So they don't have much insight into why they're achieving the things that they're achieving. Okay. So, kind of vague. Again, like, some stuff in psychiatry is pretty vague, which is frustrating, right? Compared to other sciences where it's kind of more clear. Okay. So, and then you also have something called antagonism, characterized by grandiosity, feelings of entitlement, either overt or covert self-centeredness, meaning like it's obvious you only care about yourself, versus like mosquito cycles, like covert self-centeredness, right? Where you're doing nice things, but you're expecting something back, right? You're expecting back attention, appreciation, affection, sex. Firmly holding to the belief that one is better than others. Okay, so that's a big one, right? This one-up mentality, sort of thinking that, okay, yeah, I'm better at managing money. I am more sexually advanced or adventurous, right? I'm better at parenting. I do more than my wife, that kind of thing. Condescending towards others, meaning like, oh, again, it's just that mentality. Like I'm better than you. I'm better than the people around me. Okay. Attention seeking, excessive attempts to attract and be the focus of attention of others. Okay. Or admiration seeking. So, someone's telling a story and you have to jump in with yours, right? Everything's about you. Everything's got to be about you. So if your wife's saying, man, like you just have to make everything about you, you might have a little bit of this going on. All right. So, part C, right, is the impairments in personality functioning and the individual's personality trait expression are relatively stable across time and consistent across situations. So, in other words, to get this diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder, it has to be consistent over time, right? It wasn't like, something happened and then all of a sudden you had this. So like if you were not like this and then you won the lottery and then all of a sudden you became this way, that would not be narcissistic personality disorder, right? Or you kind of, something like that, right? Consistent across situations is another big one, right? So you're going to act this way at church. You're going to act this way at work. You're going to act this way in your marriage. You're going to act this way with friends. Okay. It's consistent across all these areas. All right. You're going to act this way with your kids, right? All over the place. So, and then part D, the impairments in personality functioning and the individual's personality trait expression are not better understood as normative for the individual's developmental stage or sociocultural environment. So like young kids kind of are narcissistic, right? They just care about themselves and that's normal, right? That's part of development. Or, maybe you just grew up in a culture that is sort of superior thinking, right? We know best, we're special, we're chosen, right? So if you look at Jesus, when he talks to the Jews, they kind of had that, right? They just thought they were the best because they were Jewish, right? And Jesus came and really challenged that idea. Okay, so they wouldn't necessarily be narcissists, maybe they just grew up in that environment, right? And that was the sociocultural norm. And then E, the impairments in personality functioning and the individual's personality trait expression are not solely due to the direct physiological effects, such as drug abuse or medication, or a general medical condition like severe head trauma. So this is always in all of the kind of last part of a psychiatric diagnosis is it's not better explained by something going on in the person's body. Okay. So drugs, medication, stuff like that. All right. So that's it, right? Pretty wordy, right? But there's also like these 9 criteria that we're going to talk about, right? So, and you have to have 5 of these 9. So, inflated sense of self-esteem, or a grandiose sense of self-importance or superiority, right? It's basically thinking you're better than other people. Okay, that's 1. Craving admiration, that's 2. You want attention, appreciation, affection, sex beyond what maybe is considered normal, right? Exploitative relationships or manipulation. Okay. You're kind of working the people around you to get the things that you want. Now, look, the thing that's kind of tricky about these is everybody does that to some extent, right? We're all sort of doing that. But again, we're just looking at what the criteria are here. Little to no empathy. Pretty straightforward there. And now, so empathy, so David Schnarch really talks about the distinction between empathy and compassion, right? And really what we're talking about here is compassion, because someone who's like a con artist, they're actually very emotionally intelligent, and they kind of have some empathy, like they're able to understand what someone else is feeling, right? And then use that to their advantage. So what we're talking about here is little to no compassion, right? Meaning you can't really get into someone's shoes and understand them and feel with them. Compassion, feel with, right? Feel with them and understand them and actually care, right? And act in a caring way. Okay, that's what we're talking about. Your identity is easily disturbed, like it's really hard for you to handle criticism. Lack of attachment and intimacy, so it's hard for you to have those kind of attachments. Feelings of depression or emptiness when not validated. Okay, that's a good one. And a sense of entitlement, like I deserve such and such. Okay. Or it can feel like others are envious of them or may envy others. So again, guys, look, most humans have some of these, right? But again, it's to where it goes to this extreme. okay, that you're going to get diagnosed with this. You need 5 out of 9 of those traits, plus those other things. It's consistent over time, it's consistent over situations, all of that, right? So, but listen, if you're thinking, oh man, shoot, like I actually have a lot of those traits, which if you've listened to this podcast for a while, you'll probably understand, dang, like actually some of these match me, right? Some of these do match. I'm this high achieving guy. Sometimes I do think I'm better than others. Sometimes I don't really listen to my wife. Sometimes I do think I know better. I do find this mosquito cycle where I do really want attention, appreciation, affection, sex from her. Okay. So I shoot. Um, you know, maybe I am. Maybe I'm a narcissist. So here's a few other criteria for things to consider. So, a narcissistic personality disorder is one of the most difficult mental health conditions to treat because many people with the disorder feel they don't have a problem, even though it causes them distress and impairs their ability to function. So, do I work with narcissists, someone who has narcissistic personality disorder? Not really, because typically they won't seek out help, right? And they're certainly not going to be open to getting any kind of coaching from someone who might tell them, hey, like you're off and you need to do something different here. Okay. So if you're considering joining my program, or even like listening to this podcast kind of lets you know, okay, I don't really have that, right? I am open to learning and understanding and trying to improve myself. Okay. So yeah, most people with the narcissistic personality disorder don't seek out help and the condition continues to persist, right? So again, I don't really work with people with narcissistic personality disorder because they wouldn't show up, right? They wouldn't come and be willing to have someone tell them, hey, like you need to change. Okay. Someone with true, genuine narcissistic personality disorder. Okay. The other thing, usually the guys I work with, it's mainly in their marriage, right? They'll say, actually, I do feel confident in my work and even in church and all of that, right? Now, part of that is because you're getting that attention, appreciation, and affection there. Okay. So it's kind of filling that self-esteem void, right? So, but maybe it's not as manipulative there, right? Or maybe you don't see as much of the issues there. So, but most guys, they'll say, look, I'm functioning fine everywhere else. It's just in my marriage, it's kind of causing some issues, right? I'm actually really able to really understand and get to win-win at work and in church and, at other areas, but at home is where I'm having the issues, right? It's typically what's going on with the guys that I work with, right? So, and again, the guys I work with, they're willing to work on it. And so they really pretty much are not going to meet the criteria for narcissistic personality disorder. Okay. So look, they may have many or even like most of the traits that we talk about, but not that full personality disorder. So if your wife thinks you're a narcissist, coming back to the point of this podcast, right? She's like, no, you're a narcissist. I know it, right? Instead of being like, no, I'm not. Hey, listen, Dr. Mike, I listened to his podcast today and he said like someone that's a narcissist, they're not going to look for help. And I'm listening to his podcast, so I'm not, right? She's going to be like, what are you talking about? You're just trying to prove you're superior to me again. You're not understanding me, right? So again, you're stuck. You're stuck again. Oh, Dr. Mike, he doesn't know what he's talking about, right? Something like that is probably what you're going to get if you come to her and you try to prove that you're not, right? Prove to her, like intellectually prove to her that you're not. Okay, you do need to prove to her that you're not a narcissist, but you have to do it in a completely different way than trying to intellectually prove to her, oh, look at the criteria. I don't mean all these criteria. Like she's gonna be like, yes, you do. That's what'll happen. So don't do that. There's a different way to prove that you're not. So here's how you do it. It's counterintuitive, but trust me on this. So you want to identify the character traits you have that are consistent with being narcissistic, right? Instead of saying, oh, no, I'm not, say, oh, shoot, hey, you are identifying some things here that actually you're right. Like some of the stuff I do is consistent with being narcissistic, right? So an inflated self-esteem or a grandiose sense of self-importance. So you could say, hey, you know what? One of these criteria here, totally. A lot of times I do think I'm better than you in some ways. Like with money, you're right. Sometimes I think I'm better with sex, with in-laws, with parenting, with religion, with housework, with time, right? I can be really judgmental of you. So you're right. In some ways I am doing that. So just by doing that, just by identifying that she's probably right, you're starting to prove you're not a narcissist, right? Now, assuming you're not doing this just to manipulate her, right? Because if you are, then you could still be being narcissistic, okay? So do this from a genuine point of trying to understand her. Hey, it's probably hard to live with somebody that acts that way, right? Like if you always were telling me you were better than me, I wouldn't like that. I wouldn't feel good. So I imagine that's not very fun for you. Okay, now you're on the right track. Now you're creating compassion in a safe place for her. Because look, at the end of the day, when we talk about the three main pillars, what she's saying is, dude, I don't feel safe with you. If you're narcissistic, I don't feel safe because you're manipulative. You don't try to understand me. I don't feel safe. So when you come to her and say, oh, yes, you are safe, she's going to feel even less safe. Versus when you come in and say, hey, you know what? Shoot, if I'm thinking I'm better than you, that's not a safe place for you to be. I don't want that. I want you to feel safe with me. Right now, you're starting to prove you're not a narcissist. Right. So then you look, craving admiration. Hey, you know what? You're right, especially with you. I am pretty needy for attention, appreciation, affection, and sex. You're right on with that. She's like, huh, well, okay. Right. There's not much for her to say from there once you kind of agree with her, right? So manipulation. So, you might say, hey, you know what? Sometimes I do the right things, but for the wrong reasons. I wash the dishes, but I do expect sex back. That's not right. That is kind of manipulation. So that must be hard on you to live with somebody like that. I don't want to be like that, right? Little to no empathy. So then you could be like, hey, you know what? Sometimes you try to tell me things and I just make it about me, or I don't listen, or I just try to fix the problem without really understanding you. And yeah, that is not really showing empathy. That's not really showing compassion. I want to get better at that so you can feel like I really care. Because I think what you're really saying here is you feel like I don't really care about you. And that's sad to me because I do, but I can see why, given these things I've been doing, you wouldn't feel that way. Okay. So when you approach it that way, now she's like, huh, like who's this guy? Right, is what she's thinking. She's like, is this a trick? That's probably part of what she's thinking. Are you trying to trick me here? But again, what people really pick up is your feelings and intentions. So if you genuinely want to understand your wife, if you genuinely want to see through her eyes and say, dang, maybe she's right. Maybe I am acting in a narcissistic way towards her. That must be really awful for her. No wonder she doesn't want to have sex with a guy who's acting narcissistic, right? So next criteria, identity is easily disturbed, like you can't handle criticism. So, if you look and you say, sheesh, whenever my wife does say something that he's even a little critical, I do get angry, or I don't really listen, or I do get like really down more than makes sense, instead of just kind of accepting that. So you can be like, you know what, you're right. I do really take things hard. I take it really personal. So that's probably annoying to you. Lack of attachment and intimacy. So you could say, yeah, sometimes I do feel disconnected. Most of the guys that I work with don't feel this a lot, right? They kind of really want to feel attached to their wife. Although sometimes it is caught up in this idea of that person versus object, right? You're looking at her as an object to serve you. Is she going to give me attention, appreciation, affection, sex, versus really trying to understand her at a deep level? Okay. Feelings of depression and emptiness when not validated, to me, is kind of the same as identity disturbed, but like, you're like, yeah, you know what? Like when you say no to sex and I get all pouty, like that's not attractive. And you know what? That is kind of a narcissistic thing, right? I feel depressed. I feel empty when you don't validate me, right? Or if I bring you a flower and you don't say thank you and gush over how great I am, yeah, I feel depressed and empty, and I don't. So you're right. That is kind of part of this narcissistic thing that I want to work on. It's probably annoying to you, right? Then that sense of entitlement. So, really looking at, do I feel like I deserve sex from my wife just because we're married, just because it's kind of the Christian agreement? Look at that. Do I feel owed certain things from my wife? And say, you know what, I do kind of have some of that. Or it can feel like they're envious of others or may envy others. I saw this criteria. Sometimes I think people do envy me, or sometimes I do envy other people. So yeah, maybe I do have some of that. Right? Because really, like, if you were to read through these with somebody, what you'll see is, most people have most of these things. So if you can identify it in yourself, right? Because your mind might say, you know what, I crave admiration too, or like, I do get, it's hard for me to handle criticism, or I do get depressed when I'm not validated, or I do envy other people. Like I think almost everybody has like 4 of these. I think we all, unless you've done like a fair amount of work, right? We feel kind of depressed or empty when we don't get validated. I think that most of us have envy for other people, right? Or we like it when other people envy us. I think we all sort of crave admiration to some extent. So I think like those 4 are pretty like common to the human experience. But again, to get the diagnosis, it needs to be to an extreme and really impairing your life, right? But again, the point of this is what we're coming back to is not uh, like a debate over what the criteria are or all that. Again, what your wife's basically saying is, I don't really feel safe with you. And so when you start making her feel safe by really understanding her, by saying, hey, look, you know, you're probably right. It's probably not fun to be married to someone like this, right? You know, that's when things can start to change for real. And that's when you start proving, oh, like maybe he's not a narcissist. Maybe he does actually care. You know, maybe he's not just trying to prove that he's better. Because as soon as you enter into some kind of debate with her, like, well, look, I only meet 4 of these criteria, and it has to be 5, so I'm not narcissistic. She's going to be like, okay, fine, yeah, you're right, and then walk away and be totally not interested and disconnected from you, and actually even more sure that you are a narcissist, right? But don't do that. Okay. So again, what you do is you let her know that she's right, right? That you do have a lot of these traits, and from a genuine spot. Okay. A narcissist might manipulate his way into this, right? He might say, oh yeah, you're right, honey, I do have these, I'm so sorry, and then just like keep doing his same stuff, right? Keep thinking he's better, all of that. Okay. But he wouldn't really try genuinely to understand his wife. So that's how you're going to prove you're different. Okay. And let her know you want to work on them to make life better for both of you. Okay. Hey, look, I don't really like feeling this emptiness. I don't really like feeling like I need attention, appreciation, affection, and sex so much. Like, I know I need to work on that stuff, you know, because it's not fair on you. I'm kind of a drain on you. And I don't like that. You know, one of the guys in the program right now, he's very keen on this idea and understanding this, that he has been kind of needy for his wife's, you know, attention that way. And it's draining, right? It's not fun for her. So he's working hard and he's doing great, right? Connecting with God more with that. And, you know, understanding he's come from a place of being full emotionally, full with love and care for himself that he can get from God, right? So again, a narcissist wouldn't do that, right? Because he'd just try to figure out some way for his wife to give him more attention, appreciation, affection, sex, or go find it somewhere else, right? So again, try to genuinely understand what it's like for her to deal with those traits, right? Show empathy. A narcissist would not do that. They just wouldn't, right? So when you come in, you're like, geez, you know, with these things I've been doing, man, that must be so hard on you. You must not feel safe with me. You must not feel like you can really tell me anything. You must feel drained all the time. You must feel like you have to control my emotions. That's probably really tiring for you, right? Try to really understand what it's like for her. A narcissist would not do that. Okay. In the apology letter I do with guys, we do a lot of this, right? We really try to understand, dang, like this stuff I've been doing, man, that really affects her in a really negative way. Okay. Learn to manage your own emotions instead of needing validation so much, right? That builds emotional strength. So that when, you know, she's having a bad day, you don't have to have a bad day. Or when she criticizes you, you don't have to flip out, right? You have enough emotional and mental strength to control all of that. Okay. A narcissist doesn't have that control, but you can. Okay. So you got to find those deep-seated thoughts and beliefs that fuel all of this, right? Where's all this coming from that you need so much validation, that you think you're better than other people? You know, and it's kind of that strange dynamic that kind of is consistent with narcissistic traits, right? Where you think you're better, but it's kind of fueled by this need to be better because you actually don't feel good enough. Like you're comparing yourself to others so you can feel better, versus coming from a spot where you already feel full and fulfilled, and you're coming from a place of service and love towards others, versus a place of, hey, I need you to pay attention and tell me I'm great, right? Again, feeling worth from God instead of others is how you generate that. And then when you can do that, you start seeing other people as equal to you, right? You're not better than them, you're not worse than them. Maybe you have different skills and abilities, and that's fine, right? And that's great. And you want to, but instead of like saying, well, I'm better than you because of that, and getting some kind of ego boost from that, you're like, hey, like I have this skill and I want to use it to serve the people around me. Okay. So you come out, you start feeling equal to other people, especially your wife, right? You don't feel better than her, you don't feel worse than her, you feel equal to her. With guys who've been through infidelity, a big part of this is forgiving yourself, right? Being able to get to a place of saying, hey, yeah, you know, I made some serious mistakes, but because of what God did, like I can feel what Christ did, I can feel okay. Like I can be whole and trust in them and get my worth from them, right? And know I'm okay and forgive myself. All right. So you want to be willing to listen to her and express yourself well. You need that balance, right? Of understanding and expressing yourself. And that comes from valuing yourself enough to express yourself and valuing her enough to understand her, right? That's how you get to these win-win agreements. That's how you really have a very outstanding marriage. Okay. And then what else you need to do is you need to get some help, right? Remember, a narcissist thinks he's so smart and so good that he doesn't need help to figure this stuff out. Right? So getting help, it's something that a person with narcissistic personality disorder just would not do, right? So they think, oh, I'll just figure it out on my own, and I'm good enough, and I'm smart enough. I don't really need the help, right? So someone who really has it will not get the help, right? So getting the help does prove to you and other people that you don't have the full-blown narcissistic personality disorder, right? So if you're relating to this, right, and you want to come and get this help, right, to build these strengths, build spiritual strengths, so you feel great about who you are, so you're not so needy on attention, appreciation, affection from others, and attention, appreciation, affection, sex from your wife, right? You're not as needy for that. Come join my program, Love, Intimacy, and Legacy. Work really hard on that to build your mentally emotional strength, so you're not so up and down depending on your wife's emotional state or her reactions to you. You're feeling strong and solid and loving no matter what she's doing. That's what we work on hard in the program and get really good at. So come join it. Again, Love, Intimacy, and Legacy. We work on all this. We build these strengths. We work on communication. How do I understand her? How do I express myself well? Right? We restore trust where it's been broken, so she feels good and safe with you. Right? So again, build that self-esteem it's built on God's opinion of you. Manage thoughts and emotions expertly. You're not dependent on your wife's moods and responses. Learn to genuinely listen and understand at a deep level, so you show empathy, right? We do a ton of that in the program. Work on that every day, very, very in a very measured and clear way. Then we get to win-win agreements that value you, because that's real self-esteem, and her, and that's real empathy and concern for her, at that deep level. Okay. So that creates mental, emotional, and sexual intimacy. So again, we rebuild those pillars. Trust, okay? Because again, if she's saying you're a narcissist, she does not trust you, right? Communication, being able to really get to that win-win agreement, really understand her, really show compassion and empathy. And then intimacy, right? Mental, emotional, and sexual intimacy, right? You can totally do that. Come to strongmarriages.com, or there's a link in the show notes as well, and apply to join. It's for high-achieving Christian men who are ready to invest time and money to really transform their marriage and get that mental, emotional, and sexual intimacy. And they're doing it every day, and just, man, it's so fun to watch. So fun to watch. The way it works, it just works, right? We identify the negative patterns, we replace them with positive ones, and then we repeat those until that's your new way of thinking, feeling, and acting, right? So it just cannot fail, especially when we align it with Christian principles and our faith in God and Christ. So come join strongmarriages.com, and I will see you there. Stay strong, men. We'll see you next episode.